What am I trying to say? Come on, sentences. Sometimes I just get going, and I don't think about where I'm ending it.
Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Snark Squad Pod, the media podcast where you can miss us with your textual accuracy. My name is Marines.
I'm Nicole Sweeney.
I'm Megan Tenyus. I'm an internet person. I live on the internet, and you all found me, right? No? I'm an artist and YouTuber. I also consume film, which I think we might talk about.
We might be talking about. Where's the best way for people to find stuff that you make?
You can find stuff that I make at youtube.com/Megan Tenyus. Really easy to spell. Toenyes.
So today we are going to be talking about A Wrinkle in Time, the movie. So we talked a couple weeks ago about the book, and then in the meanwhile we talked about adaptations and what makes a good adaptation and what we enjoyed in adaptations. And so that was all kind of prelude to having recently seen the film adaptation, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And to give us the plot synopsis for the movie, I'm going to turn it back over to Megan.
Let's see. So A Wrinkle in Time, classic. It is a story, the movie and the book, of a young girl, Meg, and her super intelligent little brother going on a quest to find their missing father, who's a physicist, and they're guided by three very beautiful, what are they? Like, very beautiful goddesses? Oprah, Reese Witherspoon, and Mindy Kaling. Is that how you say your last name?
Kaling.
Yeah, and they have to fight the darkness with love. And it's an adventure through time and wrinkles of it.
Yes,
oh,
that's it.
I think I nailed that one.
Yeah,
I'm just going to leave right now. I think that's
your work here is done.
The movie adaptation, obviously took some different liberties, and it was directed by
Ava DuVernay.
DuVernay. Okay, because I've been reading a lot about, just her whole journey and this is the first African American woman to direct a massive motion picture over $100 million. I think that's what.
Okay.
Yeah, the budget. And so this film, I think, has had a lot of lead up, like a lot of hype around it.
So you've read the book?
Yes, I listened to the audiobook just in time before seeing the movie. I literally had it on in my car on 2 times speed to finish the last half hour and 15 minutes. So yeah, I'm very familiar. And that was kind of an interesting thing coming into seeing this brand new movie after literally just listening to Madeleine L'Engle's book. So yeah, I have lots to say about it.
We generally like to get started with our baseline question of, did you like it? So I'm going to ask that here because I think it's going to be super interesting, especially because after having read the book, so Sweeney didn't like the book that much. I was kind of middling. I don't know how your experience was with the book. Did you enjoy it?
Yeah. So my experience was I loved it as a kid. And I found when Nicole invited me to come and do this podcast with you guys, I was like, oh, I kind of forget that book, but I remember loving it. So, and then for the movie, I was really surprised that it's gotten such negative film reviews.
Yeah, it's been weirdly mixed, surprising.
Yes.
I'm very surprised by how mixed the reactions to it have been.
3.5 currently out of 10 on IMDb, and I think Rotten Tomatoes is 40%.
What?
Yeah. You haven't looked at?
Whoa. I had seen reviews for it here and there, but I had not actually looked at the Rotten Tomatoes on it.
And normally I feel like I have a pulse on why movies are rotten or, good as far as Rotten Tomatoes rankings goes. But
yeah, 42% tomato meter.
Bizarre?
Y'all are wrong.
I mean, I know. I think they're wrong too. And so I was baffled by that. So today I was just kind of looking, and I was just trying to understand, why did people hate this so much? But some people hated it for dumb reasons, in my opinion. Yeah. But also there's a lot of, I read that it was the best failure or something, but I still don't understand what people think failed about it. So what do you think?
So I also thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I think so. As Mari mentioned, I did not enjoy the book, and so just like to start this off, I loved this movie.
So you liked the movie more than the book?
I enjoyed the movie way more than the book.
Cool.
I will never read that book again. I will watch this movie again.
Absolutely.
And so that's really interesting to me. I think. So our friend Sylvia watched the movie with us, and she brought something up that I think is interesting, that like her sort of feeling about some of the initial criticism that she was seeing. For her, it felt a lot like the way in which the build up to this movie kind of got conflated with Black Panther is part of why you're seeing some of the negative reaction, in that like, it's almost like people forgot that this is a children's movie.
Yeah.
Like in the way that people are reacting to it, that this is very clearly a story for children. And it doesn't mean that you can't go enjoy it as an adult, but like recognize what is and is not for you. We were kind of joking. We had like a big group that we all went and saw this movie together with, and watching the trailers. There were a number of trailers that were just like just like the humor, everything about them was just very stupid. And like repeatedly just having this moment of like, this is not for me. But like there were children. The theater was full of children who were laughing, who were loving it, right?
Yeah.
Like those because this is for them, right?
Like this is for the children, everybody. So find your inner child and freaking enjoy this wonderful film.
So I think that is definitely a piece of it. There's also certainly a piece of it took quite a few liberties as an adaptation. Like it is not a beat for beat retelling of the book, which to me, I think that is to its credit. But if you are deeply attached to the book, then I can see how that's a problem for you. I don't know. But I personally loved this. I think that the ways in which it changed, I feel like most of this conversation to me, or what I am anticipating is going to happen in this conversation, I guess, is just a lot of talking through the way in which changes were made. Like there were just a lot of choices being made that I routinely felt like, yep, that is a really interesting choice. And I get it. Like, I get why you are making this choice. Last week when we were talking about adaptations, I mentioned how when I was watching the Golden Compass movie, I kept being frustrated because, like, I wanted to make it make sense. Like, I was trying so earnestly to figure out, like, okay, what is the logic? Yeah. Like, why did you do that? And in this case, like, it was always clear to me. Like, I get why all of these choices were made. And, like, it felt like a streamlining of the story. Like, the book kind of meanders in weird ways, and which is fine. Like it's fine for that as a book, and that is not. And I say this as somebody who didn't really enjoy the book. That to me is not what I didn't enjoy about the book. Like I think that is a fine way, like for like a fine space for a book. Like a way for a book to be structured, but for a movie, like you really can't do that. You don't have the space. Mari said some stuff also last week when we were talking about adaptations about how like you have less space to tell a story. So like, what are you going to do with that space? And I think the space was used very efficiently and effectively.
I really enjoyed the movie as well. I laughed, I cried kind of deal. Like I openly sobbed in the theater, basically. I had like very strong emotional reaction to the movie. I thought it was just incredible to look at. I found myself like, there was such a sense of wonder, and we talk about this being a children's movie, and I think in a lot of ways it framed it in that sense of wonder, and that sense of like, some things didn't make sense, but they don't make sense in the book either. But also there's some of the context that is missing that when you move from book to movie. So I think there was an even bigger sense of like something's happening and you're not entirely sure why. And there wasn't like a strong core of like logic, I think, in this story and in this movie.
That and the book had kind of.
I think the book had a little bit more of kind of that logic and why things were happening, and just that idea of like traveling from planet to planet, which we condensed so much of that in the movie that you didn't really get the same sense of like the expanse of the universe and these planets that they visit and where their journey is taking them. But I get again why they made those choices. It felt a little bit off in the movie to me. But the biggest problems that I had with the narrative, are the book's fault. Like, it didn't do anything that the book didn't do already. And all it did was adapt it pretty faithfully in that regard. And if you're going to just go into this movie and think that that's super strange, and why is this a movie about like light and darkness and love conquering all? That's what the book is. That's what the story is.
That's what it is. And like Wrinkle, it's like the simple idea of that, because this was also made a long time ago, this story. So it's like a lot of things have also been inspired by A Wrinkle in Time. And so we've seen that theme done over and over and over again.
Yeah. And I mean, as I was watching it and I was having these like deep emotional reaction to it, my thought as I was watching it, and I kind of already went in knowing that the reactions were pretty mixed. I think that I had seen that the Rotten Tomato meter thing was at the 40s. I kind of boiled it down to the movie being incredibly sincere. And I think it just really, it gave itself into kind of the wildness and the illogical kind of beats of the story completely. And that is something that is not going to sit well with people. I think there was just some kind of sincerity there that I think people just have a knee-jerk reaction and be like, this is stupid. And I think that's
too
probably
earnest.
Too earnest. Yeah, that's what it was.
I think there's like a lot of like critique about, you know, the vivid colors of it and the over wardrobe switches. Like, I think some people are also put off by the like CG element, which is odd because I guess like a lot of films lean heavily on CG now. I definitely saw.
This story is, especially, it's supposed to be so fantastical. Most of it takes place in spaces that do not exist in our that must be artificially constructed.
And that's why they've had such a difficult time adapting this story to a visual. You know, I have not seen the other A Wrinkle in Time live action film.
Wait, there's another one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh. Have you seen it?
I've never seen it, no.
Okay. See, I think that would have been interesting if we would have also been comparing it to that as well. Now we'll just have a little homework to do after the podcast.
If you have seen it, let us know what you think of it. The visual stuff is really interesting to me too, because that to me is part of what is so successful about this. Like, that to me is part of what I personally think is very effective. And I think this is, so I will say, one of the things that I complained about going back to Golden Compass is that a number of choices felt like they were made towards a splashy visual, but like in a way that didn't make sense. Whereas this was catered towards visuals. I think this is like the other side of that same idea, which is that like it's catered towards the visual in a way that is still thinking about the way in which the advancement of the story, but like thinking like it felt to me like a very deliberate, like, okay, how do you paint this story rather than like, okay, how do you, like, we have the written words of here is, you know, A then B, whatever, but like what is the way that you translate that into like this very beautiful and trippy and weird visual thing, because the book is like trippy and weird in lots of ways. To me, my favorite things about the book were the things about the book that were trippy and weird. And so maybe that's also part of why, and this is another thing that we talked about with our adaptations conversation, is that there is this sense of like, you know, everybody's going into it with their own baggage of what, you know, what mattered to you in the story, and maybe what the person adapting the story found important is the opposite of what you found important. And for me, I lucked out, right? Because like what I hated the most was all the preaching. What I loved the most was how it was trippy and weird. And Ava seemed to agree with me. Less preaching, more trippy and weird. So for me,
on the same level. No, and I thought because the aesthetic was so the way it was. I think that it kind of even embodied the message of the whole story, like in a way that was so well. Like the message, you know, is it's be yourself and like don't apologize for it too. Like a little bit like Meg's story about like, you know, really accepting her faults and using that to defeat the thing too, you know, or the like whatever it is, that big evil brain, you know. So I felt like because the aesthetic was so like wonderful, it kind of assisted in the emotion. And because I also got very emotional with this, Mari. Like I mean, and I think you did too, Nicole. I feel like I heard you sniffling in the theater. and I think back to why people maybe didn't like this film. I think people sometimes get a little afraid of feeling stuff, and like, and this was so earnest, and like, I don't know, it taps into a lot of family dynamics. But there were a couple choices that she made. Sorry, I might be getting into one of our topics later. But a couple choices about like not developing Calvin, his family, the way it was in the book. I was like, is it because in the book he has a family that really doesn't care about him, and it's like this big family, and it's pretty, I didn't know if maybe it'd be too triggering or something. But at the same time, in the movie, Calvin is an only child. Maybe.
Yeah.
They don't really expand on Calvin.
They don't. Yeah.
And I kind of had an issue with that. That was because I felt like Calvin had more of a purpose in the book. And in the movie, I was thinking, if I had not read this story, would I be really annoyed that this random kid is now on this journey?
See, I completely disagree.
Really?
So when we were talking about the book, Chelsea brought up the Calvin thing. So I feel like Calvin is much better handled in the movie than in the book. I think to the question of his backstory, that to me is a little bit different. Mm-hmm. How much more like fleshed out Calvin's background is in the book versus the movie, to me is a medium thing. Like the movie doesn't have time or space. Like there's a lot happening in this movie. Like there's a lot that has to get collapsed. And I think that Calvin's backstory, you get the moment with the happy medium tells you enough for Meg to know and understand that like Calvin has some hard stuff going on at home, and like that's it, and that's really all we need. Like the movie, like the story that the movie is telling doesn't need any more of it. And I think like it's cool and great that the book has time to give us more of that, but I don't think it's necessary in the case of the movie. To the point about Calvin being there for the there on this, I think like his being there was random and weird in the book. It's random and weird. Like it's back to what Mari was saying. Like there's stuff that's random and weird in the book. Like that like the source material is random and weird. Yeah. So this is also going to be random and weird. But in particular, Chelsea's complaint, where I was going with this, was the kiss, and how like in the book there's a kiss that doesn't happen in the movie. I was waiting for it and expecting it to.
Though. It was like he presses his cheek against hers and then kiss it. So I imagined the kiss as a side thing.
Oh, huh.
I don't know.
I heard
that wrong.
I did not. You also had consumed it most recently, so I'll defer to you on that. But Chelsea, this was a thing that like made Chelsea very angry, and I agreed with the gist of Chelsea's rage, that it just felt like so unnecessary and out of nowhere. Yeah. And I feel like that whole dynamic of like Meg and Calvin played so much better in the movie than it did in the book. Like the idea of to me, like I felt like, oh, like I see it. I'm seeing this cute little young love like blossom, and we don't need a kiss. You don't. That's not necessary.
Sure. And it's more about family love than it is about this, between them, this romantic interest.
That is like a secondary thing. So so I don't know. So to me, I was way more on board with Calvin. I feel you. I definitely feel what you're saying though, that like there's less there, and like what the hell is he doing there, and whatever.
I'm going to totally disagree with Nicole and agree with Megan.
All right, that's fair.
I think what Megan is saying is true, that there was a little bit more heft to Calvin's character in the book, and when you take that away and that backstory and even his purpose and being on yes, it's weird and trippy that he's there, because he kind of has like this feeling that he should show up, and he does, and that's kind of how he gets roped into all of this.
It's like similar to Charles Wallace.
They show us that he kind of shows up because he has a feeling in the movie, but then from there, I think that he loses his purpose on the mission. Like he was there because they mention it so briefly, but he's got this way about being like a mediator. And he's like, you know, he's got this like heart of gold and he can get along with everybody. And he brings those skills almost to the journey in a way that I thought was well done, better in the book than it was in the movie. And the movie, because he gets stripped down, he becomes a barometer for how Meg is doing, basically. Like, he compliments her hair, and she's not ready to accept that compliment yet. And then later he compliments her hair and she's ready to accept that compliment. And that's literally like his purpose, is to be like the barometer for her. And it does swing more romantic, where because he had more to his character in the book, I felt like you saw more of a progression of their coming together as friends, coming together as shared experiences. You know, they're shared on a mission. And then at the end of it, like that relief of, okay, we mean something to each other. Like that had more in the book. And I get what Nicole is saying, is that it had more space to do it. But I think that the answer was not to strip Calvin down to the bare bones and just have him along for the ride. I don't think that was the right choice.
Right. Because in the movie, I was like, I don't really care about you, you know, like, and it's like, it's cute. And like, yeah, kids are going to relate to just like having a crush and like, oh, he's so cute, you know. But to me, I felt like Calvin in the book was a little bit more I enjoyed the platonic even relationship that they were forming. And yeah, there was this like romantic hint to it all. But in the movie, it felt like that was primary, like the romantic interest. And so what I liked in the book is it kind of talked about, you know, like, oh, this time I was holding his hand and comforting him or something in the blackness when they were like at what's it called? Camazotz. You know, and there was a bit of like she was at first comforted by him, but it was always just described in a way that made me not cringe, I guess. And I get a little bit sensitive to like the whole romantic, like, you know, like you have to like fall in love with the boy that's in the movie. Yeah, that's the cute one. And I don't know. And like, that's actually one thing, this is kind of off tangent, but that I enjoyed about the Star Wars Rogue One, I think it was. That was kind of the one-off. Is that Rogue One?
Yeah.
I'm like not a big Star Wars person.
We are less, but I do know that was the one-off.
The one-off.
okay. But like in that movie, I was like, okay, like I can actually get behind this one. And I know a lot of people hated it, or I don't know. I liked that at the end, they did not kiss and that they were not like in love. They were just like platonic friends, the friends that loved each other, and they like held each other and embraced until they died.
Yeah.
But like there wasn't this forced like kiss.
Oh, I mean, to that end, I think this is also, but this to me is part of a like that was a problem with the source material too.
Yeah.
Like I think I agree. Yeah, I think it would have been better if that weren't ever if that romantic line was never introduced.
Yeah,
totally 100% agree. I totally get everything you guys are saying. I think I don't care about it in kind of the same way that I didn't care about Joel Maisel not having a personality or a center or a core. There's a part of me that's just like whatever. Like this is Meg's story, and I you guys are correct, but I also I'm like I don't care.
You just don't care either way.
I just don't care. I think is ultimately what it comes down to. So the other, I'm curious to hear what you guys think about this. The other character that I was meh on in the book that I really loved on screen is Charles Wallace.
Yes.
I think we talked about this when we were talking about the book, about how there's kind of mixed reactions to Charles Wallace. I think especially if you come to this as an adult, the sort of like super hyper precocious child can kind of be really annoying. And like I get that. And for me, I wasn't super annoyed, but I also wasn't super into it. I was just kind of ambivalent. It was a thing that I was along for the ride. And I don't know how much of it is just like the movie in general or just how freaking cute and good this kid was.
So good.
This kid was great. I was like instantly in
so
love.
Well-spoken.
Yeah, he was great.
Like,
he was so great. And
even his physical acting, like when it was not him and it was the it, and he was like, like just kind of prancing around and moving in a way that was so nefarious, and you were like, oh my God, child, you're doing that so well.
Right. That's what I was about to say too, is like the child, in addition to like being adorable and whatever, like that child actor, I should probably have looked up his name first, did a really great job. Like he, for like a kid, like it was, the mannerisms and all of that. Like he was asked to do more than just be a precocious child, and he did it all quite lovely.
I have a little bit of a different opinion. Which is funny. I'm like, I didn't realize we had, but I'm glad.
It's good. Makes for good content.
Right. Because I loved him in the movie, and for some reason there's something different I would have done with how they showed his transformation from Charles Wallace into being controlled by the it. Because to me, in the book, there was a much bigger, like, struggle. And he was very well explained to be different in a very intelligent way. Like, they talked about it in the movie, but to me, again, if I hadn't have read the book, I don't know if I would have completely understood what was going on, like why he was so intelligent. Because in the
whatever was special about both Charles Wallace and
Meg?
I've already forgotten his name. The boy that
Calvin.
I don't care about.
You really don't care. Calvin, sit down.
The thing of the sort of specialness about both Charles Wallace and Calvin is definitely reduced considerably in the movie. Like, they do not get into that at any great length, which I don't know. That to me is like the necessity of that, I think is debatable.
Yeah.
But I fall down on the side of it's fine because of like space and time and whatever. But I get it. Like I also get why like that it's losing something, that something is lost.
And that's why, to me, I had a harder time, especially once they said he was adopted too. I know that was an interesting element to throw in there, and just kind of like an interesting way to also accept, adopted kids. Like, my siblings are adopted, so I appreciated it. But to me, just because of the story, to me, it was like a weird thing that doesn't make sense. Because to me, it makes sense that this physicist and microbiologist, I think she is, had this super intelligent child. And so to me, the fact that he was adopted, like, I was like, oh, maybe they'll explain, like, where is he, like, from an alien planet, or I was like, why is he...
When they introduced him being adopted, I totally thought that's where they were going with it. I was like, his being adopted is going to be like, he's like adopted from the void, or, like they have manifested a child, and now they're going to tell everyone that they adopted him, and for sure.
So because of that, and because of like the quick transition, like, it was so easy for him to be taken over by the it, whereas in the book he actually was like, yes. And I really appreciated that in the book.
When you were talking about, like, not caring about Calvin, Nicole, I wrote this down because I wanted to talk about it. The reason that I cared is tied up in this whole thing with Calvin, or with Charles Wallace as well. And it's that lack of struggle in everything that happened when they came to, when, Charles Wallace got taken over by the it, to the point where they found their father. I felt like there was such a lack of struggle there. Like, she just waltzes in and she finds him, and he's in a room that we never get told why he's in that room or what it is, and they just walk back out, and there's none of that, like, going back and forth, and Charles Wallace is fighting it, and then you have Calvin trying to, like, draw him back out and using whatever is special about him to try and fight the darkness and the evil, and we completely lose that in that section of the story. And I think it's to the detriment of the movie, because that's the point where you're just like, what's the point? Why did he get taken over? Why are we here? Where are we? Like, there were too many unanswered questions in the format of the movie that we know the answers to, but only because we read the book, and the children won't necessarily care what the answers are because they're children, and it's like like a pretty fun paced movie. So I think, and it's sacrificed those moments for a few of, like, the bigger moments. Like, there's this whole sequence where they're running from the forest that's trying to eat them, and there's a lot they put in some action sequences, which I get, to, like, speed it up, but I think you lost a lot of the, like, meat and the conflict on Camazotz.
See, okay, I was actually going to bring that up too, because I was like, why did that happen? And so I didn't even think about that until you just mentioned it. Like, it kind of lacks action sometimes. So I feel like, that serves a purpose to, like, keep the pacing up for the kids and just for the audience. But that scene was problematic in a couple ways. I feel like we're definitely critiquing. There's a lot that I really enjoyed, but, like, that was problematic. One, too, because Charles Wallace just isn't there for, like, a while, but then he shows up. And I was like, I wanted to figure out how he ran from the forest. I was curious about that choice to not Like, and he was just like, hey guys, what's up?
You guys made it? Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. Just like, but how, Charles Wallace? Like, what are you? But yeah, I mean, and you know, the dad being in that brightly colored, or not brightly colored room, but in the room instead of like a void of darkness, like it was described in the book. I mean, I think the choice to not have all the different struggles and leave out some of the storyline there, it's like it because it almost didn't matter for the movie. It's like it just mattered that he had been missing, and so it like the it had him,
right?
And I liked that Camazotz in the movie, instead of being a planet that's being controlled by this like it was a actually ever changing like evil thing.
Yeah, the series of constructions, of shifting constructions,
one in itself type of thing. Yeah, and so it's like to me it made sense that there's this random like room, like who knows, maybe that room changed like looks sometimes, you know, we don't know, but he was just trapped.
Yeah,
and she had to find him. And
yeah, all of that stuff to me, I agree that there's a lack of the struggle is definitely missing, and I think there are ways you could have done it, and I agree. Like that to me is probably the weakest part of the story is Charles Wallace being overtaken by the it. That is not given. I think that could have been given more narrative weight. I also think I don't know. I get a little anxious around the contours of talking about, well, we know things because we read the book, and assuming that bothers me a little bit because it's assuming ignorance on the part of anybody who is, you know, who's watching this without having read the book in a way that like I do not want to do. And so I don't know. I honestly cannot know how all of that reads to somebody who has not read the book. So I don't know. That to me is a point of like, I am not sure that I can't outright disagree that people who are just watching it without having read the book, you know, don't know what's going on there or whatever. But I don't want to, like, that to me is a, like, we don't know. And that's like full stop. But I loved the fact that she twisted it to being this thing of making Camazotz sort of in flux in that way. Yeah. With all of the cool sort of like trippy visual stuff. That to me is smart because it allowed the story to keep moving. Like this was a very well paced movie in my opinion. Like I feel like there's no point. The story does not lag in the movie, which I think it does lag in a couple places in the book. It's like a tightened up version of the story for me. And I think that leaning into the sort of trippy, weird visual stuff in the way that she did allowed that to be the case because you can just sort of wave some weird CGI shit over it when you need the story to get to the next point. You know what I mean? Like it's much easier, and like I think it was used effectively in that way, right? Yeah, like I don't know, she's just climbing up some invisible fucking stairs right now, and like I don't know, just that kind of stuff. I thought. I enjoyed.
I wonder
all of
if
that.
It would lag though for some people because of the very sentimental scenes. Like I think when they first get to the really nice planet with the grass and the pretty skies. What was that one? I don't know. But you know, it's beautiful. But to you know, like the pacings of movies, I thought it lagged a little bit. Yeah, but and especially when you're a kid, time feels like longer. You know, and so. I was wondering because to me that scene felt a little bit long, and the leaf monster thing that she turned into, it was beautiful, and it was a very Avatar-esque like moment visually, you know, like it was very, very well done. But I was like, this feels like it's going on for a while now, and I do want to like get to the black thing in the sky, you know, and so I was wondering if I'd be curious to hear a kid's review.
To be clear, I would like an actual child to talk to me about this movie.
To be clear, I'm not questioning if anybody who didn't read the book could understand the movie. I'm confident that even in hearing, we walked out and I heard children talking about the movie, and I heard one girl tell her mom that it was the best movie she had ever seen. Like, it was adorable.
So cute.
I know. And the mom was like, yes, and Oprah might be our next president or something. And I was like, oh, whoa, but okay.
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
Okay, calm down. Slow down.
Everyone gets so excited.
But so I'm not questioning like if you can understand what is presented. I think it is very clear and understandable. I think there are things that you cannot know because they were not presented. Like Calvin trying to get Charles Wallace back to himself. That's just not there. It's not there. And even sure. Charles Wallace's struggle within himself, like going back and forth. And they had that whole sequence where he's saying nursery rhymes and trying, there's the whole thing about the beat and the rhythm and being, but torture and like there's brainwashing that happens on this planet. We don't have any of that. Any of that is presented. And I feel like, we have to take into consideration that we brought that knowledge with us. And so we see Camazotz in a way that other people who have not read the book don't, just because they don't have the context and it wasn't ever on the screen. So that
it's simpler to just make it an evil thing.
And a very plain evil thing. So, and I think that I think you did need to punch up the action, but I think that there were ways to punch up the action in the places where the plot most needed them. And I think that struggle was one of them. The whole leaf monster and the flowers and, Calvin falling down, like none of that was needed. None of that was pertinent to the plot at all. You could have had better showdowns on Camazotz with more action that actually fed into the plot of good versus evil versus like this whole other thing that was kind of meandering. And even the beginning of like getting to the point where they're off on the adventure where, they meet what's her name? Reese Witherspoon. And then they meet and then they meet Mindy Kaling. And so it takes a while where Charles Wallace is like shouting like vague, like, oh, it's almost time. We're almost there. And it's like, okay, are we there yet? Like there was a lot of ambling to me. And then so it just seemed weird that we didn't put enough time and attention in the places that I think could have been better suited to the narrative of the movie as a whole.
Yeah. Nicole.
I mean, it's fine. You guys can keep being haters, and that's cool.
I really enjoyed this movie.
I think it's just to help.
Yeah, except the flow of this conversation is Nicole says things she likes, and Megan and Mari complain about them.
Just challenging
so here's
you.
another thing that I liked, and you guys are free to tell me that it sucked. But I openly hated the brain, it in the book. I fucking hated it.
Why?
It was so stupid. It was so stupid.
Like
all of that build up.
Yeah.
We get to the end and there's a fucking brain in a room. Like what the hell? And I also hated it because of the way that it fed into a lot of the preaching that was going on. That like your end game is love defeats a brain. That had a very gross. That like the optics of that for me were just like nope, hard pass.
Yep.
However, changing that brain in the way that they did here to where they're like inside first of all, like being inside with like all the neurons and
so
all of that.
Because you're like right there in the center of it.
Cooler than the stupid disembodied brain of the thing, which I read a critical review of this movie that was complaining because this reviewer thought that the brain was such a terrifying villain. And I was like, nah, you're wrong. You're totally wrong. That villain is stupid. This villain, like this,
I agree with you.
Way better. Way better.
Yeah.
So that's my other offering.
Absolutely. I mean, and the way that the like things would like grab Meg and throw her too, I thought that was great. And
it gave it like a physic, it gave it a physicality that it did not otherwise have. And that to me is also a thing of the difference between book and movie. Like I think that you can not hate the brain in the book the way that I did, but still see this as a smart sort of move because you don't need that physicality in the book in the way that you need it on screen.
Absolutely. And that I thought was a success. It was emotional and really high action as far as Meg being like, no, I love you, Charles Wallace. I love you, and just like, and there was this big little battle about that. And he was struggling and you could see him struggling and he would almost break through but then he wouldn't, and then he would. So to me, so I'm not hating on it, but so that feeling that I thought did really well in the climax of the movie, I thought elements of that when he meets Mr. Red or whatever that guy's name is, I thought that could have been a little bit more of like a pull so that I emotionally was like, oh my gosh, Charles Wallace, you're smarter than this. Like you're smarter than to be taken over by this like 1 is 2 is 2 is 3, whatever that thing was. And so then, but like in the movie, I felt like he was just like a little kid being taken advantage of and like he wasn't smart enough to defeat it. But whereas in the book, to me, if I hadn't even read the book, I probably would have been fine with that. But that's one element of his character that I really admired, was the fact that he was smarter than this. Like, and he almost got out of it, but it still took him, you know?
Right,
and so that struggle, I feel like that could have been a really good, like heartache.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna hate. I totally agree. I think that, you know, it's one thing when you read on like black and white, you know, on paper that there's a giant brain in a room. Like, I don't know, but you guys, my mental image is immediately like the bubblegum pink brain that you like kind of pulsing and like, but this like really upped the action, and like you said, and it an example of a really smart way to adapt things, because it never went full on brain, but it gave you the visual enough that you were like, like it felt cool to notice that there were like neurons and these synapses, and it's kind of like, you know, it felt cool to watch, and it did kind of up the action. And the portion of that I love the most is that when she's talking about, you know, Charles Wallace, I know you love me, you know, you wait for me when I need milk in the middle of the night, and I know that you did this, orchestrated this whole thing, went on this adventure for me because I wanted to find Dad. And it was like such a moment where you realize, you know, this little kid really didn't know his dad. He never met him, but yet he was here still invested in this adventure and, you know, in finding him because of his sister. And that was such a moment where I was like, I'm crying again. Yeah.
I know the love between them. Like, it was just so... That and the dad scene.
I lost it.
Yeah, the sibling
when she gets reunited with her dad, and she keeps saying "daddy" over and over again, and like whimpering. And every time she whimpered, it was like a fresh stream of tears down my face. Like, I could not.
I relate 100% to that.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
That is another, like, the interesting visual choices, I think, enhanced that, like, because there's not a lot going on in that space. So, like, first you're like, okay, it's a weird looking space in keeping with everything Camazotz, but then like it's ultimately also very simple and stripped down. And there were a couple of very beautiful shots of each of them standing in their respective brightly colored hallways, you know? Oh, yes.
Cry again. Just
even the first shot where he's backlit, so he's just a shadow, but he's crouched down so far that at first it almost looks like vulture-like. He looks like a bird in shadow almost because of the way that he's crouched down. And when he starts unfolding and you realize that it's him, it's a man, you know, there's like such a gut punch in that moment where you just kind of realize that, you know, for all we know, he's been in this hidey hole for 4 years now, and just how that reduced him in that moment. I thought that was really, really brilliantly shown with visuals only.
It was such a visual treat to me that I like that. To me, I think that is why I come down so hard on the side of like, I'm here for this.
Oh, yeah.
Is like, that is the thing that I said this when we were talking about the book. The things that I thought were good about the book and the things that I wanted more of was sort of the weirdness of the other worlds. And I think, you know, I don't know. So that's why, so the part that you guys said you found lagging, to me, I was like...
You were so fascinated.
Yeah. There's more time in another place. And like that, to me, all of the visual weirdness of this movie, to me, is like, that is the essence of all of my favorite stuff in the book.
Cool. That makes sense to me.
Is that, and then that and the familial relationships, which I think is also very well kept intact. I think to that end, it's also, we haven't even talked about the fact that they subtracted the other siblings, but I think that to me... I think that was a smart choice. Like, I think that is not, which is not to say anything about that they were not necessary or useful in the book. But I think, again, going back to this question of you have to streamline things, that to me seems like such an obvious, like, yep, we're paring this down. Yeah. They can go. I am a little confused by their addition of the mean girl. Had this, it took me a bit to come down on the side of, no, that really wasn't necessary, in part because that actress she's the girl from Girl Meets World, which I never actually watched Girl Meets World. I just know this actress from like social media. She's very charming and like sweet and great.
Mm-hmm. So seeing her in that role.
She
was totally
so I just like love her. And so it took me a bit like of processing to be like, no, why was she there? She didn't need to be there. Yeah. My love of this actress was like,
yeah, what are you doing? You're so nice.
You shouldn't be here. We didn't need. That is definitely a place where like you could have accelerated. To Mari's point about the build up to the adventure, setting all of that stage. You needed, maybe like one of the, I don't know.
It happened maybe too much.
Yes,
but,
you could.
And
you
I think
have
it was kind of cheap shorthand. We needed to be able to see that Meg was not in a happy place, and you kind of get that from the fact that her father is missing. And I think they needed to establish too that people were assuming something about Meg's family and about her father, and she kind of was holding out hope. So all of that I think was essential to establish, but then to kind of establish her sadness with the cheap shorthand of a mean girl. I didn't, I think this book and this movie were smarter than that. It wasn't necessary to me, like the girl hate on top of it, to be like, and see, people are mean. Yeah, like, okay, we get it. Like, you could have spent that time elsewhere. Right. It just wasn't needed to me.
Yeah, I agree. I did like the incorporation of when we were being described what the it was. We went on a little side visual of seeing everybody's it.
Yeah.
Seeing her it. I think her name was Veronica, or maybe I'm just making that up. But
Shrug.
Shrug. I liked that it showed that she was struggling with her body image, because that's one useful element to her character, I think, is just showing like it's an evil thing when you don't love your body.
Yeah, I think it was a way of not fully redeeming, but a sort of an attempt at redeeming the inclusion of that character. Right. That was a useful space for her at the very least. I liked the visual sort of like, what the it is doing kind of thing. That was a neat little. It was a neat little thing in a children's movie. Yes. Like I think that's a thing I would probably feel very differently about if this were not a movie for children. I think, but like
not necessary, but
but like in a movie for children that like you have to have lessons, like that's the thing, right? I enjoyed that.
I have something that I liked, and I'm curious if you guys liked it as well, because at first when we get to the planet with the happy medium, I had conflicting emotions, because I was like, wait,
this
the happy medium isn't supposed to be Zach Galifianakis as like a guru.
Yeah.
It's like this woman with a crystal ball.
Yeah.
When I realized that they were kind of all coming together in this sort of like meditation and kind of yoga.
Yeah.
Like at first, again, for a moment it was eye roll. And then I kind of settled on feeling like, no, actually, this is really cool that we're teaching kids that meditation, collecting yourself, is so important in finding answers or whatever. Like, to me, as an anxious person who's struggled with some panic episodes and getting worse and worse in my adult life, like it's like this is again from my own personal background, but I wasn't really taught that like meditating and breathing was, because I always just thought it was such a simple thing. I was like, why would I stop what I'm doing? Like, I'm a really active, like, go get 'em personality. So I'm like, why would I sit in a room for 30 minutes and do nothing? Like, oh my God, that's such a waste of time. And that's how I viewed it for so long. And then because of my health and like just my like own mental state and like needing to work on that and finding that it's sometimes as simple as just like stopping and breathing, like to me, I didn't really see that in mainstream media.
Yeah. This like, here's an anxious child.
Right.
And like, let's work with this anxious child on like breathing. Yeah, for sure.
So to me, I don't know. I kind of liked that.
I also just enjoyed the kind of, again, the narrative and visual plays on the happy medium, like that kind of stuff, which I don't think was in the book. Maybe I'm forgetting it, but the idea of like medium,
balance.
And balance and all of that. I thought was fun and cool.
I like the line that she has when she's in there when they're trying to get her to like balance and like self-reflect, and she kind of snaps out of it and it's like, I think about this all the time. Like I don't want to. I don't want to anymore. And I was like, oh girl, I feel that.
I feel you.
Same. Sometimes the emotional energy is too much. But like to learn to fight against that and to embrace that about yourself, like, is such an important lesson. Again, and just talking about a children's movie needing all the lessons of all time.
Yeah. I have one positive thing too that I wrote down and I wanted to mention, and we've kind of mentioned it several times, but just to like put a pin on it, I also thought that this entire movie was incredibly gorgeous, and just like the aspect of just like looking at it, enjoying it was great, and probably one of the best things about it. I have to say that all of the costumes, my God, from when Reese Witherspoon walks in a sheet and she looks phenomenal. Yep. Like the first note I took,
was like, of course Reese Witherspoon.
I know.
Could do that.
The first note I took in the theater, like I whipped out my phone and I was that person. I was like, the sheet dress was gorgeous because I just wanted to remember.
Don't forget the sheet dress. Yeah,
but also I think
never forget. Because you did, like now you have delivered on that promise to yourself in the theater.
Good job. You've redeemed it. Yeah.
And then the other thing that I thought like was really great with the visuals was just a lot of the way that the shots and things were framed. And a great example of that is when we first meet Mindy Kaling's character, which I'm sorry, I don't know which one's which, but she's sitting in the house and she's on a chair, and the way that the camera comes in and like travels almost up her body and then takes like different little sections of the scene, it had such a sense of wonder that you could almost see like the child looking at that and experiencing it the way that the camera was. You know what I mean? Like it just, all
totally.
of it was super open and just had that sense of wonder like built into all of the ways that it was framing all of these really impressive things.
Yeah, everything. Yeah. The sense of wonder permeated all of the sort of cinematography choices.
And I love that. See, something positive, Nicole.
Yes.
Wow, thank you. I mean, that for me is the most important something positive. Again, like I already said this, but I like that to me is like I will watch this again and again for that purpose.
I want to see it again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of Reese Witherspoon and the Mrs. W's, I thought Mrs. Whatsit was, I just pictured her so differently in the book. So I was that took me a minute. Did you guys feel that at all? Any like struggle to accept Mrs. Whatsit?
No.
Nope. I wasn't expecting anything of them, probably because I read this book after the trailer was already out. So I was reading and it was Reese Witherspoon, Oprah, and Mindy Kaling.
Yes.
Like it was never not
interesting.
Those people in my head. So, and I just loved that they were super elaborate and beautiful. They were stunning, all three of them, and striking, just because it said so much about the different kinds of ways that you can be beautiful. And, you know, there was that moment where Meg looks at Oprah and she goes, "You're beautiful." And she goes, "You are too." And I was just like, I'm crying. Yeah. I know.
Oh, man.
And on that note, we are going to wrap it up for this week. Thank you guys so much for listening to another episode. We would love for you guys to come and chat with us about A Wrinkle in Time, both the movie and the book, and it as an adaptation in general. You can find us at SnarkSquad.com or over on Twitter at Snark_squad. You can find me at My Name is Marines.
I am at Sweeney Says.
I am at Megan 10 Yes, which is 10 yes.
Thank you so much to Stephen Chin for our fancy music, and we will see you guys again next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.